Okay, so during this presentation we're going to have a very brief look at the history of the format, the reality format, particularly how the Kim Kardashian format was commissioned. We're going to look at what the appeal is to the audience, how the series has evolved, some of the mechanics that the programme makers think about when putting these shows together, obviously the brand and the future of the keeping up with the Kardashians. So major things to discuss in 20 minutes, but maybe we'll give some headlines if nothing else. So the reality format really exploded on our screens in the late 1990s with formats such as Survivor, Big Brother came a little bit later. So it was really more based in the studio, but these shows started to give the viewers a sense of ownership, a sense of being able to talk back and affect the outcomes of these shows as well. So they really created these water cooler moments that became, real talking points. So we moved from 2000 onwards really out of the studio and more into the reality formats shot in real life situations, but all with a glamorous edge. So we saw the rise of formats such as The Hills and later The Only Way is Essex, and of course the Osbournes came later too. So we started to notice about celebrities becoming really good focuses for these kinds of reality shows.
Okay, so now a bit more about Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It started production in the summer of 2007 and then aired first on the E! Channel in America of the autumn of that year. So it's now been with us for 8 whole years. And its creator is Ryan Seacrest, who you might be more familiar with as the host of American Idol. So he's a very big figure there, and he was very interested in finding the next sort of reality TV hit success, so such as influenced by the Osbournes, because obviously that was a huge sort of game changer for this kind of genre. And he was looking for a family, so it all comes down to the casting, so a dynamic family who are willing to let the cameras into their homes. And in television they do sort of taster tapes. They started searching for families and they came across the Kardashians, and instantly they thought, this is TV gold. They were filming a barbecue with all the family there, and it's sort of, as the quote says here, I remember perfectly, the cameraman called me from their house on Sunday afternoon and said, it's absolutely golden, you're going to die when you see this tape. They're so funny, they're so fun, there is so much love in the family, and they're so chaotic. They throw each other in the pool. So this was kind of like the very heart of the moment. This is where it all started, the funness about this family being perfect for this type of reality TV show, and about the casting being crucial. What we'll do now is have a look at actually how the show has evolved from the very first season in 2001 to the present season, which has just started now in November the 15th. So let's see if that's, hopefully, fingers crossed, this will all connect to the internet and work.
All right, we're ready.
We're ready. Here. Go in, you guys. Is necessary. Awful. No, that is not cute.
I need someone to make me laugh.
Where's Kim? Kim's always late. Here. Kim, out of the way. Stop. Jealous. No.
That's it, we're done.
Okay, so that was the very first series, and you can see still that it was very much about Kim. She was still the lead figure into this family, so providing access to her family, but it was all through her. Oh, sorry, let me just get the... Let's just see how that's changed now.
This season on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. The next part of our trip is heading to Jerusalem to baptize North. Caitlin, let me take this.
I still have a long way to go before I can process all of this.
He's gone.
Don't cry.
The only thing is I haven't met her. I haven't either. She's like, I'm just gonna ask you one question about Dad, and I had a little attack. Did you read it? I'm not gonna be fully supportive if she's not fully supportive of our mom. Lamar says hi. I don't know why Chloe and Lamar are talking. I'm not gonna not talk to Lamar because you disapprove. Corey? When did he get there? I literally probably have too much sex. This is too much.
Damn, I feel like a promoter tonight with all these bitches.
Scott is like on a crazy bender. Scott Duthie gets very hands-on with brunette stylist. I've worked so hard to keep this family
can see there how much it's actually completely transformed in many ways in terms of the drama, the additional characters, and we'll talk a bit more about the mechanics of this. But you can see just from looking at the first season to season 11, now the whole family are celebrities in their own right. It's through this access of having Kim as the key figure, now everyone is just as famous.
You can see it's become much darker, much edgier, much more dramatic. It's gone from the fun, you know, kind of just family, larger than life family, of course, having fun, but it's much darker. So the appeal for the audience, well, the audience are able to make sort of emotional connections. They can live vicariously through Kim's world, but there's that sense, that kind of compelling sense to want to share it with friends. You know, Kim's got 36.4 million followers on Twitter and growing day by day. So there's that sense that they can actually talk directly to Kim as well and have access to her world through the TV show, but also through that direct link. So elements of escapism and seeing how the other half live. And the reality shows that have worked best in this kind of genre is that very glamorous world, the world that we wouldn't maybe have access to otherwise. Of course, it's had lots of criticism. The reality television has faced critics arguing that these shows put contributors in artificial situations and people are not really acting themselves. Programme makers, we have a lot of discussion with our compliance and lawyers about how far can we push things, how, you know, where's the boundary, where does the line sit, you know, as a programme maker, how far can we, you know, push that. But Kim and the Kardashians are experts at creating their own drama now. They're able to come to the programme makers and suggest themes and storylines and situations. But it is a real debate for the programme team to decide, you know, what is acceptable and what isn't.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about the mechanics of keeping up with the Kardashians. So obviously we said the casting is absolutely crucial because there needs to be a really strong relationship between the production team and the cast, and there has to be a real trust there because they have to organise the schedules, they have to sort of, you know, relax in front of the crew almost as if they're not there. So with the Kardashians, Kris and some of the other Kardashians now have executive producer credits. Kris has always had an executive producer credit, so she's very much involved. She'll have her say. They have a production meeting and they're very much talking about planning out what will be happening this series, what are some of the things that might be happening around here. And you'll notice in the credits that there are story editors. So yes, it's reality, but they're also thinking about where the show is going, what the journey will be, and building all of that. And of course it's real world events, but they're aware that this is a reality show and it's run by ratings and it's very much about the drama. So it takes on board the very nature of a drama production. It has that aesthetic. It appeals to be, you know, it tries to be very high-end, very cinematic in the way it tells its stories. And so much also comes into the post-production stage, so editing those stories together. So a lot will be lost in the edit suite because it might be dull or not really going anywhere. So it's very much about producing this family in the way they want to be seen to the world, but also the way the producers think will engage with the audiences in the most way. So adding that drama, adding that conflict, and to have that, you have to have a lot more additional cast members around, so that you're having, you know, people dropping in and having additional storylines that you can take things onto to add all that drama and construction is obviously very important in terms of the mechanics.
So as Lucy said, the show is using drama conventions. It will even name each episode after a theme. So a couple of examples here. So the proposal. Kris Humphries plans to ask Kim to marry him, but the argument between the two makes him wonder if he's proceeding too quickly. Vanity Unfair from 2015. Caitlyn comes out in her first big magazine interview and states things the family considers hurtful. Kim does her best to pick up the pieces. So very much like a soap opera, very much what you might see on the EPG for the latest Coronation Street or EastEnders storyline, some kind of drama happening. Always about entangled relationships and the cliffhanger moments, will they, won't they?
Okay, so Kris Jenner, obviously the matriarch of this family, was really you know, the driving force behind keeping up with the Kardashians. She manages her daughters, and she's very sort of concentrated on keeping this brand the way she wants it to be. And This is what Ryan Seacrest, the executive producer, had to say about her. I admire Chris because she has done an amazing job at taking what was just a television show and building it into a massive empire for the family. And now, if you think about Kim Kardashian, she's the most highly paid reality TV star that we know. She has over 37 million Twitter followers and it's growing daily. According to Forbes, Kim Kardashian's earnings almost doubled in 2015 to 53 million. So she's really at the end of this, but also for the rest of the family, and new research is showing that in terms of Instagram and different sort of apps that they're doing, that the younger sisters are now also building on this, because obviously these shows are very sort of youth skewed. So Kylie in particular is now sort of following up in other multi-platforms on this.
So the future for Keeping Up with the Kardashians, are we tired of this genre yet? The viewing figures have dipped slightly, but that said, we're viewing in different ways. We're looking at multi-platform and different ways of seeing content and time shifting. So it may have hit its peak there, but it still seems to be going really, really strong. As we said, Kim and the Kardashians are experts at reinventing storylines that keep them fresh. Kanye West for president, who could have scripted that? I mean, if you scripted that, no one would believe it. If you'd gone to a commissioning meeting, they just wouldn't believe it. So they're experts at that. They've even named their daughters and children kind of interesting names to keep up that discussion and conversation with Northwest, who will be next, we'll find out. So we had over 150 episodes so far, and it's now in its 11th series, so we will see what happens next.
Yeah, so well, obviously with the Keeping Up the Kardashians, it is actually signed up for 4 more series. So our fascination with this family and our fascination with celebrities doesn't seem to be waning. And it has its people criticise this or don't criticise it, but obviously it's actually holding up a mirror to where we are in society. And I think it's this sort of television has a long life.
And I think the kind of stir that this conference has caused, and that kind of should we be discussing this? Should the viewing figures prove that we should be discussing it? This has a massive influence on young people and society, so it's fantastic this is happening. So we've kind of run through our presentation pretty quickly, but really interested to hear your questions. As I said, we are program makers, so we have wrestled with these discussions about casting and the ethics and the compliance issues and so forth. So really interested to hear your questions slightly later on as well.
Yeah,
so thank you
very much for listening.
Okay, so our paper's about a particular episode of the Kardashians from season 7, episode 14, called Tales from the Kardashian Crypt. And we'll talk through that episode. Dylan's going to cover it from a Heideggerian perspective, so we're going to have some hardcore philosophy for you. I'm going to talk about it more generally in terms of presenting death on reality TV. Can you talk a little bit louder? Yes, no problem. Since its inception, Keeping Up with the Kardashians' days have been numbered, if we are to listen to its many and varied critics, that is. Despite widespread snark and criticism, the show entered its 11th season in 2015, showing little signs of stopping. In fact, it seems more likely that the popularity of the show's stars is what will signal its inevitable end. But with individuals of arguable superstar status, like Kanye West, agreeing to take part in the show, perhaps even the accumulating fame of the cast is not an issue, which leaves only death, or a wane in popularity. But be serious. When it comes to the topic of death, the Kardashians and Jenners are as open about it as they are the rest of their lives. Seemingly constantly captured, both on their show and in real time via the media, we're watching them all age, encounter medical issues, elective surgeries, and facing mortality. For the most part, the Kardashians' mortality is discussed via the deaths of others. The Kardashian patriarch, Robert Kardashian, friends who once starred on the show, Kris Jenner's best friend, Nicole Brown, or by the threat of death, such as Rob Kardashian's health issues, Scott Disick's near overdose, Lamar Odom's drug problem. But very occasionally, the Kardashians and the Jenners encounter death on very real terms, as real as reality TV will allow anyway. The Kardashians skirt the issue of death, acting as if immortality is achievable, and if anyone's achieving it, they are. Kris Jenner is perhaps the only family member to comfortably discuss death, ever the practical momager, wanting to ensure her many assets are protected in the event of her passing, and that the watertight familial image remains intact. The episode which highlights the importance of Kris Jenner placing on the idea of having an organised death is Tales from the Kardashian Crypt. Gathering the family around the kitchen table, Kris Jenner announces her plan to buy a burial plot for the family. When Rob and Khloe balk at the idea, asking how they'll all fit, Kris replies that they'll buy 12 plots, 25 plots, however much it adds up to. There is even talk of purchasing a mausoleum. Kris discusses the plan with her mother, who thinks it's a great idea, and that Kris should get the family buried wherever Marilyn Monroe's body is. There is no question in her mind that the Kardashian status is that of Hollywood royalty. Is the Marilyn comment tongue-in-cheek? A little. But there's an insinuation being made that the Kardashian-Jenner clan have overcome any criticism of being faux celebrities and have earned a recognition that can be cashed in upon death. The nature of measuring the value of celebrity is entirely subjective. Surely it's possible to argue that the reach a celebrity has, the international impact of their endeavours, the popularity of the projects they're involved in are all measurable aspects of careers which account for the level of fame an individual has. And by this rationale, each of the Kardashians is not only worthy of their celebrity, but they've worked harder than anyone for it. The assumption that if a person's fame stems from reality TV or a sex tape, they are not a credible celebrity is a paradox. Instead, we should be looking at the level of power an individual has and how it is they've achieved it. What's fascinating about Keeping Up with the Kardashians is the way it unrelentingly documents almost all moments of its participants' lives. We've seen surgeries, births, hospitalizations, and near-death experiences, which is what makes the family's visit to Hollywood Forever, LA's prime location for celebrity burials, even more apt. Having recorded every aspect of their lives to date, why not capture the next steps, the conclusion, the afterlife? When Kris Jenner climbs into a casket, crosses her arms over her chest and plays dead, this is not only great television, but a perfect understanding of life's transience. Not only are the Kardashians acutely aware of their own mortality, they view it the way they do every other moment in their lives, a way to make bank. Also, by aligning themselves with an official Hollywood cemetery, they're cementing the longevity their critics said they'd never have. If Kim Kardashian's break the internet photo shoot isn't proof of infamy, well, there's really no pleasing some people. Death on the show is not always a comedic affair, however. The death of the family's patriarch, Robert Kardashian, is much referenced, with most members of the family crying on camera when talking about the death of their father. His death has impacted everyone, as has the role he played in the court case of O.J. Simpson, accused of murdering his wife and Kris Jenner's close friend Nicole Brown. These deaths continue to mark the show and the lives of our protagonists. For a reality show assumed to be vacuous, it handles the subject of death in excruciating detail. For people considered vapid, the Kardashians sure have a handle on the darkness life is capable of, and the ways in which experiencing death can change a person irreparably. In the later seasons, discussions of death appear to present an ingrained and very much self-aware nihilism. Reality TV is often dubbed nihilistic in its insistence on documenting the meaninglessness of everyday life, but the Kardashians take this a step further. For instance, in spin-off series Kourtney and Khloe Take the Hamptons, Scott Disick is confronted with the death of both of his parents. Kourtney Kardashian insists that he grieve and confronts this loss, but Disick is unable to. Instead, he books club appearances and ends up in hospital following a near drug overdose. Death is matched with death. Confronted with this abyss and unable to grasp the mortality forced upon him, Disick unravels. In their self-made universe, Kris Jenner is God, literally controlling every aspect of the family's image, which is why Tales from the Kardashian Crypt makes sense. Responsible for booking appearances, brokering deals, spinning negative news stories into positive ones, slipping rumours to tabloids, turning real life into fiction, Kris Jenner is every bit the omnipresent universe god you might expect. Sure, her chat show may not have lasted very long, but without Kris Jenner, it's unlikely the Kardashians would have reached the levels of fame they have. As it's a world of her creation, it's little wonder that Jenner is incredibly concerned with how her and her family will be portrayed, even after death, and that she would pay as much attention to their enduring images post-death. Kris Jenner quiets her critics by paying little attention to them, and buying her family burial plots, tombs, and mausoleums is the ultimate act of silencing those critics who have sought to denigrate the Kardashian name. These critics, though, appear to be in an increasing minority, especially as even Hillary Clinton seems to be a fan. In some ways, the Kardashians are now less accessible than they were at first. As bona fide celebrities, never not polished or primped, they have become less like people we know and have a chance of meeting. Though at the same time, by the medium of social media, the Kardashians are ever accessible and even contactable, though I have yet to get one of them to reply to one of my tweets, despite writing about them constantly. Whether it's posting selfies to Instagram and Facebook, or updating their recently launched apps with so-called exclusive content, it feels as though we are always aware of what the Kardashians are doing, which makes the issue of their mortality even more pressing.
Tales from the Kardashian Crypt is composed of 3 tales. The main tale focuses on Kris' plans for her funeral. The next tale begins with Khloe and Kim purchasing a fish for Kourtney's son Mason. And the third tale concerns Kourtney's decision about who should have guardianship of her son in the event of her and Scott dying. This paper will focus on the first 2 tales that are concerned about death, rather than the third, which is actually about sibling rivalry. It examines these tales employing the ontological framework which Heidegger outlines in his seminal work of philosophy, Being and Time, and in particular, his account of death and authenticity. To begin with, I will offer a brief introduction to some of the key themes of Heidegger's Being and Time. So if you could all stay awake for this bit, I'd much appreciate it. Heidegger begins by raising what he claims is the forgotten question of Western philosophy, namely the question of the meaning of being. This question, he argues, needs to be raised anew. Philosophy since Descartes has focused its attention on the problems of epistemology, that is to say, on examining, in the light of sceptical arguments, whether and how knowledge is even possible. The problem is framed in terms of whether our thoughts and perceptions can be said to correspond truthfully with a reality outside of our minds. For Heidegger, the problem with such accounts is their failure to first raise the question of being. Before even considering the nature of knowledge, one must consider the being of the being that knows. The being that knows is characterised by Heidegger as Dasein, from the German meaning their being. He rejects the characterisation of our being as consciousness, the mind, or the subject, precisely because he thinks these terms belong to the epistemological worldview he is hoping to undermine. Worldliness is essential to Dasein. Heidegger characterises knowledge as a founded mode of being in the world. The traditional philosophical view is concerned with coming to an understanding of how consciousness can come into contact with a world outside of itself. Heidegger believes this problem only arises as a result of a mistaken view of the nature of our essential being. We are not in the world as water is in a glass, as it were by chance. Being in the world is fundamental to our existence. Heidegger goes on to identify a number of other components to his fundamental ontology of Dasein, including being with others, being there, mood, understanding, and care. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of this ontological framework is the distinction he draws between authentic and inauthentic Dasein. It is this distinction that I will focus on. Sorry, I lost it. It is this distinction I will focus on in my reading of Tales from the Kardashian Crypt, and in particular, Heidegger's account of death, given in the first chapter of Division 2 of Being and Time. The episode begins with Khloe quoting Lamar's tattoo, "Get busy living or get busy dying." After the opening titles, Kim and Khloe are seen driving along. Kim wants to buy Mason, Kourtney's son, a gift. "I really think it's like appropriate to get a little fish. That's like perfect," she claims. When the two of them turn up with the fish for Mason, Kourtney and Scott are less than pleased. "I'm not a pet person," Kourtney remarks. Scott asks if Chloe and Kim are going to come round every day to feed the fish. Mason, however, is happy with his present. Unfortunately, things do not go according to plan. In a subsequent scene, Chloe comes round and whilst playing with Mason, she notices that one of the fish has died. She tells Courtney but hides it from Mason. Courtney remarks, "This is the exact reason why I don't like pets, because they die and it's very sad and tragic." Before flushing the unfortunate creature down the toilet, Courtney takes its picture so that she can go to the pet store and buy a replacement. When they get there, she says firmly, it needs to be the exact same one. Chloe is sceptical about Mason's ability to notice the fish has been replaced, but Courtney is unswerving in her determination. Mason must not discover that the fish died. She buys the fish a new tank so that she doesn't have to do this again. Chloe remarks, "First Courtney did not like that Kim and I bought Mason 2 fish, and now Courtney is buying an entire aquarium." However, much to Courtney's annoyance, and in spite of her precautions, another fish dies. "This is becoming an inconvenience," she complains to Kim. So how does this all relate to Heidegger? Who knows? Time and again, Courtney talks about replacing the fish with an exact copy. As long as the 2 fish look alike, they are, to all intents and purposes, the same fish as far as she is concerned. The notion of replacement is a key component of Heidegger's account of the inauthentic. There are certain roles that we as human beings play in life, particularly our working life, whereby we are immersed in the public life of what Heidegger calls the they. He tells us, "The they maintains itself factically in the averageness of what is proper, what is allowed and what is not, of what is granted success and what is not. This averageness, which prescribes what can and may be ventured, watches over every exception which thrusts itself to the fore. We are thrown into the inauthentic clamour of the idle talk of the they. Our immersion in the they and its concerns prevents us from living an authentic life. One may work as a postman, a hairdresser, a chef, or even a reality TV star, but these roles are for the most part roles that could be performed by someone else. Rather like poor Pebbles the fish, we are essentially replaceable in this public world of the they because we contribute nothing of our individual selves to it. That is not to say that Heidegger is suggesting that society could not function without these roles, but that our involvement in such roles can cover over our own potentiality for authentic being. The central tale in the episode concerns Chris's plans for her funeral. She has a conversation with her mother about burial plots. Following this, she decides to discuss things with Caitlyn Jenner. The episode takes place prior to Caitlyn's transition when she was still known as Bruce. Chris tells Bruce about how difficult things were for her family after her father died. She wants to make plans so the children don't have to worry if anything should happen to either of them. The latter, however, is somewhat averse to having this conversation. "Everyone's gonna die," Chris announces. Bruce jokes that she will finally get some peace and quiet when she is dead. Chris then proceeds to gather the family together to discuss the matter. "There's a lot to do and I really want to make sure that everything's organised in the event that something happens to one of my family members," she says. Chris wants to buy a number of plots for the Kardashian Jenner clan. The family's response is predictably facetious. Chloe remarks, "Yeah, let's make some commissions on those plots, baby." But Chris is determined to ignore their making fun of her. "So basically, ladies," she says, "I want to gift you guys with where we're going to end up for the rest of our lives." Chris finds a funeral parlour called Hollywood Forever. She and Bruce sit down and discuss her plan with the proprietor and staff. They talk about building a Kardashian mausoleum. Rob, Kim and Chloe arrive and Chris mentions what she describes as her gift to the family. Do they want to be buried or cremated? She decides to make a list of family members. "I'm emotionally all in on this journey, so I'd like to do the mausoleum," she announces. They have a look round the cemetery and the various options on offer. Chloe remarks sarcastically, we want our own lake with a mausoleum, and we want it like with a moat, so no one can steal our bodies ever." Chris tells us, "It's actually interesting and fun what we're doing." Later in the episode, they look at coffins and Chris actually climbs inside one to test it. As she clambers up, Kim tells her, "Don't slip and die." Rob takes a picture on his phone. Afterwards she remarks, "That's actually very, very comfortable." Rob and Chloe, however, are starting to feel more and more uncomfortable. So what are we to make of this from a Heideggerian perspective? Death is crucial to Heidegger's account of authenticity. The death of any individual Dasein is non-relational. One cannot die on another's behalf. Death cannot, as it were, be outstripped. Unlike the activities that entail Dasein's immersion in the they, the death of an individual is entirely unique to them. Chris appears to be facing death in an organised and matter-of-fact manner, but actually her way of treating death is as another bit of business to be taken care of, is entirely inauthentic. Stephen Mulhall, in his book Heidegger and Being in Time, offers the following pertinent remarks. Quote, "Those who face their own death by focusing on the plans for their funeral are covering over the fact that death is a non-relational possibility, not a social event. And in doing so, they cover over the essential mindness of existence. In avoiding the fact that each of us has our own and only our own death to die, they avoid the fact that each of us has our own and only our own life to live." And I'm thinking back there to get busy living or get busy dying, which is the tattoo we were talking about at the start. Heidegger notes that the they has its own ways of discussing death. He writes, "In Dasein's public way of interpreting, it is said that one dies because everyone else and oneself can talk himself into saying, 'In no case is it I myself, for this one is the nobody.'" Chris's remark to Bruce earlier, "Everyone's going to die," is characteristic of that kind of idle talk. Such talk does not represent a way of confronting one's own mortality, but is instead mired in tired, cliched phrases, virtually devoid of any real meaning. It is interesting that Chris should talk about the mausoleum idea as being where we'll end up for the rest of our lives, as if the Kardashian Jenners should continue to live after they have died. Wittgenstein remarks in his Tractatus, "One's death is not an event in one's life, not even the last one." Lying in a coffin and remarking on how comfortable it is does not mean one has come any nearer to an authentic confrontation with one's mortality. This last stunt is what pushes Rob and Chloe into confronting Chris about her involving everyone in her funeral plans. Having already lost their father Robert Kardashian, both are unhappy that Chris should be discussing her own death in such an open and somewhat insensitive manner. Chris says, "I mean, I don't want you to be upset by it, for sure. It's just an important thing I need to do." Chloe's response has a definite ring of Heideggerian authenticity. "Exactly, but it's something that you need to do, okay? Death is non-relational. It is, in each case, mine." Thanks.
My paper is about, I'm an American Vogue subscriber, so I was as not shocked, but I was part of the probably negative thought around Kim Kardashian being on the cover of American Vogue. So in researching this paper, I actually began to think of her in a very positive way as a businesswoman. So basically my paper looks at how she actually made it from her sex tape to the cover of American Vogue. 2015 sees Kim Kardashian West as a pop culture and fashion icon, a TV star, an author, a mother and an entrepreneur, and a Vogue cover girl. What Observer.com style refers to, quote, an ongoing performance art shrine to Elizabeth Taylor. She boasts pride of place at Paris Fashion Week as a muse to luxury labels Givenchy and Balmain, and with more than 100 million followers across Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, her app Kim Kardashian Hollywood is top of the iTunes gaming charts, making her the new darling of the tech world. Time magazine dubbed Kim the first lady of #fame on this year's list of America's 100 most influential people, alongside Angela Merkel and Hillary Clinton. In an all-American success story for the millennium, a Hollywood-raised celebutante managed to propel herself from a sex tape scandal onto the cover of the ultimate fashion bible, American Vogue, in just 8 years. It's easy to see why early career Kim was of no interest to high fashion. The face of countless products since her Keeping Up with the Kardashians debut in 2007, including a laser hair removal apparatus, butt-shaping shoes, and a burger chain restaurant, Kim struggled to break the glass ceiling of tabloids and TV guides. Despite a number of product endorsement lawsuits, a messy 72-day marriage, and the aforementioned sex tape, America's curvy poster girl earned big. However, the price she paid for her success was the wide-held perception of her as a tacky, talentless chancer.
If I were the editor-in-chief of America's top fashion magazine, I probably wouldn't have touched her with a barge pole either. So what changed Vogue's mind? The answer lies in drive, determination and a finger well placed on the pulse. Despite being one of the most mocked and media dissected women in the world, Kim built on successes and failures alike. With grit and a forward-facing attitude, she weathered a non-stop flow of online fat-shaming and slut-shaming campaigns. She profited on the polarising quality of her fame by courting her anti-fans, who are just as interested as her supporters. Kim's grasp of the shift in media from print to online and the written word to the image would catapult her from just another reality star to a global household name. A trifecta of mutually beneficial strategies showed an innate marketing savvy, churning out new images of herself in different outfits via photo shoots, public appearances and paparazzi, releasing a steady flow of Kardashian branded products to assist celebrity-obsessed millennials in moulding themselves in her image. And most importantly, building a personal online presence on social media, bypassing the blogs and the tabloids and directly engaging with her fans en masse. All with the cameras rolling, of course. There is little doubt that joining forces with infamous rapper Kanye West was a game changer. Revered in fashion, art and hip-hop, the in-crowd couldn't exclude his girl for long. He influenced a fashion-forward, pared-back yet sexy style for his then-fiancée, and together they formed a dynamic paparazzi-friendly duo, earning her pride of place front row at the prestigious Valentino Haute Couture show in July 2012. Kim's subsequent appearance on the 2013 Met Gala red carpet in a gloved floral Givenchy gown was her debutante ball to high fashion. Though many questioned her suitability to luxury, her mass appeal, particularly to young female consumers, was undeniable. The cover of American Vogue is a trophy, but has long since been a fashion-only publication. Under editor-in-chief Anna Wintour, Vogue has been selling celebrity over supermodels for decades, from singers and actors to athletes and a first lady. In the context of fame and influence, Kim Ye were a perfect fit to this approach, and tapping into Kim's media profile and global fan base couldn't hurt. To achieve this ultimate nod from the industry's gatekeeper Wintour, one must prove oneself to be a heavyweight. Whether it was her alliance with infamous anti-celebrity Kanye West, a shrewd understanding of social media and consumer culture, or the celebrity-specific pop culture explosion of this century, Kim Kardashian West proved her value with a staggering media profile. No, sorry, I'm not done. Anna wrote of her decision to feature the hashtag world most talked about couple in that infamous April 2014 issue. Quote, "Those who define the culture at any given moment, who stir things up, whose presence in the world shapes the way it looks and influences the way we see it. I think we can all agree in the fact that role is being currently played by Kim and Kanye to a T, or perhaps that should be to a K. Haters can make wisecracks at her ass, laugh at her duck-face selfies and chant famous for being famous until they're blue in the face. But with a net worth of $85 million and counting, it's undeniable that Kim Kardashian is legitimately one of the most relevant businesswomen of this decade, and that deserves respect."
Yes. Hi, I was really interested by the question from the lady at the front about Caitlyn Jenner and the idea of death surrounding the transition. So, and then the idea of inauthenticity. So by treating Caitlyn Jenner's transition as a death and giving it these cliche phrases and actually kind of endowing it with in a heterosexual way, a kind of, because it's the family rallying round and it's this social convention that's tied to heterosexual culture. Are we removing the queerness from the event? And are we rejecting the what we might call the authentic queerness of this transition? Are we making Caitlyn Jenner more assimilated, let's say?
Thank you, interesting question. And finally.
Yeah, finally, it might or might not resonate, but I found people quite judgy about an academic interest in this area and these individuals. And I know, for example, that, when I told people where I was coming and so on, it sounds like Anna Wintour had to defend her interest in Kim Kardashian. I'm just wondering about the panel's experience of that, of being academics interested in this area, and their brainy friends and how they might judge it, and whether that's going to be better or worse. It's just an interesting area because trashy cheap, but you're all smart.
I actually think that the heteronormativity, I think that's coming as much from Caitlyn as it is from the Kardashians, and it's been quite upsetting and quite worrying that Caitlyn is really focusing on what it is to be a woman, but her idea of being a woman is very heteronormative, is very anti-gay rights. So it's kind of a really complicated big issue that I can't cover in 1 minute, but it's a really interesting point that we should talk about.
I think also we're talking about authenticity. You can, and Heidegger in particular, you could look at, depending on how you interpret that transition, Caitlyn's transition, you could look at it as kind of an attempt at authenticity as Heidegger would understand it, in the sense that we were looking earlier on the keynote speaker had that picture of Bruce as this sort of macho, and again I think a lot of, as far as what Caitlyn said, Caitlyn felt pressured at that time almost to do the opposite from being a woman, just to think, right, I'm going to throw myself into athletics, I'm going to ignore this kind of real who I really am and just do that instead. So there's a sense in which that transition is kind of a brave transition, but also it's strange. For example, like there's an episode of I'm Kate where she's there saying, well, I'd feel more like a woman if I was with a man, for example.
Well, I just sort of echo that. I mean, it felt like it'd come completely out of the blue. It was like, what, is this for real? Is this another kind of stunt?
Yeah.
And then, as we talked about earlier, some of the scenes felt really real because of the slight naivety and rawness of all of that. So, but then at the same time, very confused messages at times. So, yeah, it's a bit too big to discuss.
It is a
Yeah, and I think referring to it as a death, I mean, it's their personal experience to deal with it as the death of Bruce, or Bruiser as they call him. And honestly, from my perspective, is Bruce and Caitlyn are all the same person, and I think that to treat it as death, maybe that's how they deal with it. But I think that to honour the experience that Caitlyn as Bruce went through for all those years, it's not a death as much as a rebirth, I suppose.